Daniel never planned to stay long that evening. The bar wasn't fancy, just quiet, tucked away from the noise of downtown. For a man whose days were filled with delivery stops and parenting duties, it was his once-a-week escape, an hour of solitude, not indulgence. He nursed his drink slowly, eyes heavy, posture tired, the weight of years without his wife carved subtly into his expression. Across town, in a glass tower office, Claire Vance ended another ruthless meeting with board members who feared her more than they respected her. Her driver waited, her schedule still packed, but something in her snapped. Without telling anyone, she dismissed the rest of the day and had her driver take her somewhere, anywhere without pretense. She chose the bar not for its charm but because no one would expect to find her there. She entered without fanfare, expensive heels muted against the wood floor, her presence sharp and cold. She sat one seat apart from Daniel, either looking at the other. Time passed in silence until the bartender, distracted, ignored them both. "How long does it take to pour a drink?" she muttered. Daniel gave a soft chuckle. "Maybe he's aging it." She turned slightly, eyes meeting his, surprised at his dry wit. That one line softened something. They started talking, not in the polished, performative way Claire was used to, but genuinely. Daniel asked her nothing about money, work, or image. She didn't offer. He told her he had a daughter, 9 years old, brilliant and messy, and the reason he hadn't lost his mind. She listened without interruption, sipping slowly. For Claire, it was disarming. People usually wanted something. This man didn't even ask her name. That gave her space to speak honestly for the first time in a long while. She admitted feeling tired, though she never used that word publicly. "It's like everyone expects you to be a machine," she said. Daniel nodded. "Machines don't have kids to tuck in or reasons to get up when it's hard." She glanced at him. Something about that line stayed with her. They spoke about nothing and everything, music from their youth, dreams half forgotten, the kind of small stories people usually save for old friends. For Daniel, talking to a stranger was easier than talking to family who still looked at him with pity. Claire found herself laughing, a real, startled kind of laugh, when he told her about his failed attempt to bake a birthday cake that exploded like a volcano. She asked what happened to the cake. "Emma said it was the best disaster ever. We ate the crater with ice cream." Claire smiled at the thought. Hours passed unnoticed. The bar remained quiet, unnoticed by the world. Their conversation drifted into pauses that weren't awkward, just comfortable. When she glanced at her phone, midnight had come and gone. "I should go," she said. Daniel nodded. No phone numbers exchanged, no promises made. Just a mutual glance that lingered. As she walked out, she turned once more to look at him, head lowered, hands around his glass like it was the last warmth he'd find all night. The next morning, Claire sat in her office, scrolling through emails she wasn't really reading. Her assistant handed her a schedule. Meetings. Contracts. PR issues. But her mind wasn't in it. Her thoughts drifted back to that man who didn't treat her like a product, who hadn't once tried to impress or intimidate. For once, she'd been just a woman, sitting beside a man who'd quietly carried more weight than she'd ever realized. She asked the assistant to cancel the last 2 meetings. The assistant blinked, surprised. "You sure?" Claire nodded, eyes already distant. That night, Daniel returned to the bar without knowing why. Habit, maybe? Or maybe he was just curious to see if the moment had been real or one of those rare things that disappear once they're lived. He sat down again, same stool, same weary posture. When the door opened, he didn't turn. But he heard the click of familiar heels, soft but decisive. She sat in the same seat. When he finally looked, she just said, "Thought I owed you another bad joke." He smiled, more in his eyes than on his lips. "Bartender's still slow." And just like that, the conversation resumed. No masks. No titles. Just 2 people clinging to the rarest thing in their lives, a connection neither of them had asked for, yet both of them desperately needed. Daniel didn't usually talk much, especially not to strangers. But that night, words came easier. Maybe it was the way she listened, quiet, steady, no interruptions. Her eyes weren't impatient, just focused, like she actually wanted to understand instead of waiting for her turn to speak. He told her about mornings that started before sunrise, packing Emma's lunch, rushing out to beat traffic, the van's heater barely working. He didn't complain. It was just life now. She asked questions, not invasive, just curious. When he mentioned Emma loved drawing and wanted to be an astronaut, Claire smiled in a way that felt genuine. Claire spoke sparingly, measured but not cold. She didn't offer her job title. Instead, she mentioned long flights, impersonal hotels, and never really knowing if the people around her liked her or just feared disappointing her. Daniel didn't pry. He said, "Sounds exhausting." She nodded. No judgment, no advice. Just understanding. That's what made it different. She didn't need to prove anything. Neither did he. He shared how losing his wife reshaped everything. One day she was there, laughing, cooking, humming old songs, and then she wasn't. He didn't dramatize it. The silence after her funeral had been louder than any grief he expected. "I didn't know how quiet a home could get until Emma asked why nobody sang anymore." Claire's face softened. There was a pause. Then she quietly said she'd been engaged once. A long time ago. It fell apart under pressure, expectations, the walls people build when they start protecting careers more than love. "You blink," she said, "and realize no one really knows you anymore." They talked about small joys, Daniel's terrible attempts at braiding Emma's hair, Claire's obsession with obscure foreign candies no one else liked. The conversation skipped formalities. They weren't trying to impress, just to connect. When Claire asked what kept him going, Daniel answered without hesitation. "Emma. She needs to know not all stories end with people giving up." That line stayed with Claire. In her world, people quit all the time. They abandoned marriages, projects, values. Most just called it pivoting. But here was a man with calloused hands and tired eyes talking about staying, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. She felt ashamed for how little she'd risked for connection. Power she had. Stability, too. But not this kind of certainty, the kind that shows up every day, even when it hurts. Daniel noticed how she lit up when he talked about Emma. He said, "You'd like her. She's got no filter. Brutally honest and smarter than me already." Claire laughed. "She sounds dangerous." He grinned. "She is. But in the best way." There was pride in his voice, the kind that didn't need to be shouted. It sat there, obvious and unshakable. Claire mentioned she hadn't spoken to her parents in years. Expectations turned into resentment, and eventually silence. She hadn't missed them as much as she thought she would, but something in her voice betrayed that claim. Daniel didn't offer sympathy. He just nodded, like someone who understood that not every wound bleeds where you can see it. The bartender dropped the check without being asked. Claire reached for it. Daniel stopped her. "Split it," he said. She tilted her head. "Why?" he replied. "Because I don't know you, and you don't know me." She didn't argue. That mattered more than she realized at the time. When they finally stood to leave, there was no awkward pause or fake promise to meet again. Just a quiet look. Mutual. Steady. She left first, coat draped over her arm, heels clicking against worn floorboards. Daniel stayed for a few more minutes, just long enough to finish his drink. On his walk home, the city felt less distant. Claire rode home with the window half down. Her driver asked if everything was okay. She said yes, but her mind was elsewhere. For the first time in a while, she felt something shift, subtle, but undeniable. She had talked. Not as a CEO, not as someone managing reputations. Just as a person. And someone had listened without expectation. That night, either of them slept early. Daniel sat by Emma's bedside longer than usual. Claire stood on her balcony, city lights flickering like stars that didn't quite know where they belonged. They were strangers still. But not entirely. Something unnamed had started to take shape, quiet and slow, like a door either of them expected to find had quietly opened. Daniel hadn't expected her to come back, but when she walked in the next evening, something in him eased. It wasn't excitement, it was more like clarity. She took the same seat without asking, offered a small nod, and picked up where they'd left off. Their conversation resumed naturally, filled with light sarcasm and subtle warmth. Claire looked different, not in appearance, but in presence. She seemed more grounded, less guarded. For a while, everything felt easy again. But ease doesn't last when truth walks in. A man at the far end of the bar noticed Claire, did a double take, and approached. "Excuse me, you're Claire Vance, right?" She paused, gave a tight smile, nodded. "I thought so," he said, then looked at Daniel. "You know who she is, man? She's the one running that mega firm, Vance Global." He kept talking, but Daniel wasn't listening anymore. Claire didn't explain. She just waited. When the stranger walked away, Daniel stared at her differently. "That's who you are." She didn't flinch. "It doesn't change anything," I said. He exhaled slowly. "You let me talk to you like we were on the same level." Her tone stayed even. "Because we were." He shook his head. "No. You're rich. Powerful. I'm a delivery driver with a kid and an old van." She leaned forward slightly. "And you think that makes your story smaller?" His voice dropped. "It makes it irrelevant in your world." She didn't argue, just said, "You listened without judgment. That's rarer than any title I carry." He stood, needing distance, needing to think. "You came here to feel normal. I get it. But I'm not part of your experiment." She winced at the word. "It wasn't like that." He gave a tired smile, more sad than angry. "Doesn't matter. I don't belong in your circle, Claire." She reached into her coat, handed him a card. "I didn't come back to impress you. I came back because I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation." He hesitated, card in hand. She added, "You reminded me who I used to be. Before all this." Then she left. Daniel didn't move for a while. The bar felt colder now, smaller. The card burned in his pocket as he walked home. That night, Emma asked why he seemed upset. He didn't have an answer she'd understand, so he just said, "Grown-up stuff." But her hug lasted longer than usual. Claire returned to her world, one of boardrooms and polished words, but something was off. Her decisions were still sharp, her image intact, but her thoughts drifted. She remembered Daniel's hands, worn, steady, and how he talked about life with zero filters. She missed that honesty. No one in her life spoke plainly anymore. Daniel carried on like always. Mornings were the same. Routes stayed unchanged. But every quiet moment made him think of her words, how people expected her to be a machine. He hated that he understood it. Different lives, same feeling. The world always expected too much from people who gave everything and got no rest. The cards stayed untouched for days. He considered calling, then told himself it was foolish. He imagined her back in that glass tower, surrounded by assistants, forgetting about the guy in the faded hoodie and work boots. But he didn't throw the card away. It sat on his nightstand, untouched but not unwanted. Claire noticed herself hesitating during meetings, losing focus during pitches. Her assistant commented she seemed distracted. She brushed it off. But something had shifted. Daniel hadn't treated her like a name. That felt more valuable than any deal she'd closed that week. Daniel tried to forget, but little things pulled her back into his mind. A woman at a coffee shop wore a similar perfume. A billboard had her company's logo. Emma, one night, asked if he'd ever made a new friend lately. He thought about answering, paused, then just said, "Maybe." One evening, while loading boxes late at work, Daniel pulled the card out and stared at the name. Claire Vance. There was a number. He thought of everything, his world, hers, the silence between them now. Then he put the card back without calling. Because sometimes, when two lives collide that sharply, the space they leave is too wide to cross. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Even if a small part still hoped otherwise. Claire hadn't planned the visit. Her driver pulled up near the warehouse where Daniel worked, and for a moment she stayed in the car, unsure. She didn't bring assistants or wear anything that marked her status. No camera-ready outfit. Just jeans and a coat. When she finally stepped out, the hesitation didn't leave her face. She wasn't there as a CEO. She wasn't even sure what she was, only that silence had started to weigh more than risk. Daniel didn't notice her at first. He was mid-shift, hauling boxes, shoulders stiff from a long week. When he finally saw her, he froze for half a breath, then walked over slowly, eyes unreadable. "Didn't expect you here," he said. She kept her voice calm. "I figured that." There was no smile between them, only silence packed with everything left unsaid. "I didn't come to talk about work," she said. "I'm not here to prove anything." Daniel gave a slight nod, arms crossed, waiting. Claire continued. "You were right. Our worlds don't match. I know that. But I never saw you as less." He didn't flinch, but the edge in his stare softened. "Then why disappear into yours the moment it got complicated?" She took a breath. "Because I'm used to people walking away, and I thought maybe it was easier if I went first." Daniel didn't respond right away. He looked past her, like he needed something stable to fix his eyes on. "You know what it's like trying to explain to a kid why people don't stay." Claire lowered her gaze. "I'm not here to make promises. Just to say I didn't forget." He turned slightly, voice low. "I'm still the same guy, Claire. Same van. Same paycheck. Same kid who wants ice cream for dinner every night." She smiled faintly. "And I'm still the same woman who hasn't had a real conversation in years until I met you." Another pause, then she handed him something, a small, printed invitation. A community event. Not corporate. Not glamorous. Just a charity night for local kids. You and Emma. No pressure. Come if you want. He looked at the card. "Why this?" She shrugged. "Because it's not about me. It's about giving something back. And because maybe I wanted a reason to see you both." He didn't give an answer, didn't commit. She didn't press. Just left the invitation in his hand and walked away. That night, Daniel sat with Emma at the table, the invitation beside their dinner plates. She asked what it was. "Just a thing someone invited us to," he said. "Someone new?" she asked. He nodded. "Someone complicated." Emma grinned. "Like math or like spaghetti?" He laughed for the first time in days. "Bit of both." She picked up the card and said, "If there's music, can I dance?" He ruffled her hair. "If we go, you can dance all night." Claire didn't know if he'd show. The night of the event, she kept glancing at the entrance. It wasn't a corporate gala. No media. Just music, games, and a few volunteers helping set up booths. For once, she blended in. The crowd didn't care who she was. She didn't want them to. What she wanted was far simpler, and more uncertain. When Daniel finally walked in, Emma holding his hand, Claire's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. Relief without expression. He walked toward her slowly, nodded, and said, "She's been talking about face paint the whole ride." Claire smiled. "We've got a whole table. Pick anything." Emma ran off ahead. Daniel stayed close, still cautious. "You sure you want us here?" Claire nodded. "I don't invite people unless I mean it." They didn't say much after that, but they didn't need to. They moved through the evening side by side. Emma painted a butterfly on her cheek, Daniel helped stack supplies, and Claire found herself laughing without trying. Not a performative kind, but something that came from the relief of not pretending. Daniel watched her, not with awe, but curiosity. This wasn't the woman from the headlines. This was someone trying to build something real in a world built to distract. And she wasn't doing it for cameras or shareholders, just for herself. By the end of the evening, Emma was asleep on Daniel's shoulder. Claire stood nearby, arms folded, not ready to leave. Daniel glanced at her. "You still think we're from different worlds?" Claire met his eyes. "Yeah. But maybe we can build a small one in between. He didn't answer, just nodded. But for the first time since they'd met, the silence between them didn't feel unfinished. It felt like something new had begun, quiet, uncertain, but real. The crowd thinned by late evening, but Daniel didn't rush to leave. Emma curled up on a bench nearby, too tired to speak, still wearing her butterfly face paint. Claire stood quietly beside him, her expression calm, almost hesitant. Daniel glanced at her, then looked away. She had fun, he said softly. Claire nodded. I could tell. They didn't need to recount details or relive every moment. It had already imprinted itself in both of them. What mattered now was everything unspoken. The space between them had changed. Not narrowed by declarations or sudden decisions, but shaped into something steadier. Claire no longer spoke in careful sentences. Around him, she was quieter, more present. She didn't rush to fill silences. Daniel, who had grown used to being overlooked, noticed every time she paid attention, really paid attention, not to what he said, but to what he didn't. That kind of listening had become rare in his life. They didn't call it anything. They didn't define what was happening. But in the weeks that followed, something constant took root. Claire showed up, not in grand gestures, but in consistent ways. Dropping off art supplies for Emma. Joining them for lunch on Saturdays. Once, she asked Daniel what he missed most before life became all survival. He said he missed slow mornings. Not the luxury of them, but the feeling, waking up without a clock in his head. She didn't offer him time, but she offered him peace. And that, to him, meant more. Daniel didn't try to impress her. He didn't change his routine. He still fixed the van himself. Still worked the same shifts. But now, he made time for small things. Coffee with her before work. Talking late into the night over simple meals. Emma took to her naturally, never forced. One evening, she told Daniel, Claire doesn't talk like other grown-ups. She listens more. That sentence lingered with him. Claire's world didn't slow down. Her office still buzzed, her name still carried weight, but her attention drifted more often. She missed calls without apology. Delayed meetings she once thought critical. For the first time, her schedule bent towards something that felt genuine. Daniel never asked for space in her world. He just showed her what it was like to have a life beyond it. They didn't talk about love. They didn't make promises. Yet something more permanent formed in the quiet consistency between them. She admired the way he stayed grounded, how he navigated every challenge without bitterness. He respected how she carried weight most couldn't see and never asked for credit. Both of them had grown used to being misunderstood, but now neither had to explain anymore. Eventually, Claire brought up an idea. Not in a boardroom, but at Daniel's kitchen table. A foundation, not charity in name only, but something real. Programs for single parents, community workshops, education drives, designed for people like him, people without time or privilege but full of potential. Daniel didn't say yes right away. He just listened, then asked, You want me to help? Claire replied, I don't just want you to. I need you to. That became their new rhythm. Working quietly. Not to impress the world, but to reach those who never had a voice in it. Daniel brought insight from lived experience. Claire brought structure and influence. Together, they balanced what the other lacked. Emma, unknowingly, became their anchor. 6 months in, the foundation opened its first center. Small, practical, tucked into a neighborhood most people overlooked. Claire gave a short speech. Daniel didn't. But he stood beside her as she spoke, and she looked at him like he was the reason any of it existed. After the ceremony, Daniel stayed behind, walking through the quiet rooms they'd helped create. Claire joined him. He looked at her and said, This started in a bar neither of us wanted to be in. She smiled. And it turned into something neither of us planned. He didn't hold her hand. He didn't need to. They weren't chasing a perfect ending. They'd already begun something better, real, unfinished, and lasting. In a world that often demands clarity, they chose something more honest, presence, patience, and a path built not on fantasy, but quiet courage.